Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping into our finest plate armor and preparing for a true test of faith because we are facing down the massive class overhaul coming to the Paladin in the Midnight expansion.
Yeah, this is one of the most fundamental redesigns we've seen for a core class in years. We're not just talking about tuning numbers. This is, sweeping changes to resource mechanics, defensive philosophies, the whole identity for retribution, protection, and holy.
And our mission today is to give you the shortcut. We're going to analyze what's coming and figure out how these updates from like the smallest talent pruning to the biggest apex abilities will reshape how the class actually feels to play. The stated goal was to streamline everything.
Exactly, to reduce that feeling of information overload and consolidate power. And our job is to figure out if they actually preserved that core holy warrior fantasy while doing it. Is it more control or is it just simpler?
Okay, let's unpack this, beginning with the foundations. We should start with the class-wide talent reworks, the changes that affect every single paladin.
Right. And the first thing you notice is the pruning. Abilities that felt low impact or just required too much management, like Judgment of Light or Seal of the Crusader, they're just gone. It's a deliberate reduction of the cognitive load.
I notice Holy Prism is moving. It's now in the class tree as a choice node against Divine Toll. That feels like a really significant choice you have to make now.
It is, and it forces a more impactful decision. But what's really important is how they're compensating for removing all those small passive damage talents.
Right, because you can't just remove damage without adding it back somewhere else.
And their solution is massive and universal. All holy power spenders now inherently deal 20% more healing and damage, just baseline.
Wow, that's huge. So why do you think they chose that route? Just one massive buff instead of all those little passive talents?
It's about simplifying the math, really. Instead of chasing a complex web of secondary stats to maximize a dozen tiny buffs, they've put the power right into your main resource. It means your core abilities always feel valuable right from the start.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk about the Universal Hammer of Wrath redesign. During Wings, your judgment just becomes Hammer of Wrath.
Yep, it's overridden, and it ties directly into the new Vengeful Wrath talent, which gives it that execute functionality. It deals more damage the lower the target's health is.
So your big damage cooldown turns your main builder into a hard-hitting execute. That really doubles down on the burst window.
It really does. And speaking of new universal tools, we have the new Blessing duo, Blessing of Dusk and Blessing of Dawn, a really fascinating risk-reward choice.
Okay, so Blessing of Dusk is the reactive one.
Exactly, it's a failsafe.
Okay.
It gives you damage reduction that scales up to 10% as your health goes down. It's strongest right when you're about to die, giving your healer a window to save you.
And Blessing of Dawn is the proactive side. If you're above 85% health, you take a small portion of the damage your allies take. It's sort of a high uptime damage soak.
And the strategic use for that is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
Think about holy paladins with high leech. They can easily offset that damage. You basically become this mobile, small-scale damage redistribution hub for your group.
But this brings up a tricky point. The class tree is supposed to be universal, but we're seeing spec-specific things creep in, like Shield of Vengeance. It's tied to divine protection, but it's retribution only.
Yeah, and that does raise a question about the integrity of the class tree's philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a universal chassis, putting in abilities that only one spec can use, it muddies the water. It shows they're prioritizing specific tuning over the strict design rule.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for me. Retribution Paladin. Ret sees this massive overhaul aimed at simplifying their setup and really honing in on their funnel damage.
Absolutely. The philosophy shift for Red was all about reducing that invisible, passive, holy power generation from crusading strikes and solving what people call the third gate problem.
Wait, hold on. For anyone who isn't deep into the theory crafting, can you quickly explain the third gate problem?
Sure. It was this feeling that you had to choose one of three talent paths. Pure, single target, pure AoE, or this weird hybrid that wasn't good at either. The third gate was that wall, where your talents made you super inefficient at one damage type if you specialized in the other.
Got it. So how'd they fix it? First up, resource generation. Crusading Strikes is gone.
Gone. And it's replaced by the updated Templar Strikes. Now, it replaces your Crusader Strike. It loses a charge, but it hits twice and generates one holy power. The follow-up ability, Templar Slash, is always a crit.
So it's a much more active, intentional way to build resources.
Right, you're pressing a button, not just waiting for auto attacks.
Yeah.
But losing that second charge has some pretty big rotational constraints.
Oh, I was going to ask about that. That feels like it would reduce your flexibility, doesn't it?
It does, dramatically. That second charge was your safety net for movement, for pooling resources. Now it's much more of a hit the button when it's up style. It's simpler, but it could feel clunky under pressure.
Okay, and to cut down on complexity, they've fused Execution Sentence and Final Reckoning into one big 1-minute cooldown.
And this fusion is a game changer for funnel damage. It blasts all targets for holy damage, and then 10 seconds later, your main target takes 10% of the total damage you dealt to every target.
So you hit 5 enemies, and a huge chunk of that total damage gets compressed and just slammed into the boss.
Exactly. It creates this perfect window where Ret becomes the absolute king of converting cleave damage into single target pressure.
Yeah.
And the capstone talent, Judge, Jury, and Executioner, makes your next 2 spenders free. Super efficient.
And the final payoff is that Apex talent, Light Within.
Light Within just reinforces all of this. Art of War procs now boost Blade of Justice by a massive 150%. Casting Wings instantly gives you a proc, and during Wings, Blade of Justice shoots out a frontal cleave. Your single target builder now has baked in AoE.
Ret sounds really refined.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears to protection. These changes feel less like an identity crisis and more about, quality of life.
Overwhelmingly. The changes were driven by the stress of the opener, that chaotic scramble for threat, for holy power, for placing consecration. And they also tackled their biggest defensive weakness, magic damage.
Which leads us straight to the new mastery, Divine Bulwark. It increases your melee block, but it doubles your chance to block spells and DOTs.
It's a major structural shift. Prod Paladins are now incredibly sturdy against magic, but it does introduce some unpredictability.
I have to challenge that a little. Isn't that trade-off worth it? You gain this huge magical durability, but you might get unlucky on a rare giant physical hit. For most content, wouldn't that be a net positive?
Oh, it's definitely net positive for most content, especially Mythic Plus. But for that top-tier raider where a boss hits you once every 45 seconds for a massive, unavoidable fatal smash, relying on a block chance can lead to a low-roll death. It introduces a little bit of randomness.
I see. But the QOL improvements are just outstanding. The Sanctuary update, where Consecration's damage reduction lasts for 4 seconds after you leave it, that's enormous.
That grace period is huge. Prot Paladins were always punished for movement. Now you have the freedom to reposition without losing your core defensive buff.
And the opener problem seems totally solved by Valiant Crusade. You pop Divine Steed out of combat, and you get Shield of the Righteous for the whole duration plus 2 seconds.
It's brilliant design. You charge in with your active mitigation already up. It completely removes that ramp-up stress.
And we can't ignore the Word of Glory mana fix. The cost is doubled, but it's fully refunded if you cast it on yourself.
Thank goodness. Prot Paladins going out of mana just trying to stay alive was absurd. This makes their own survivability mana neutral, which is how it should have always been.
So for protection, it's power consolidated into fewer parts, a huge boost to magic defense, and a bunch of fixes to smooth things out.
Exactly. And doubling the charges of Guardian of Ancient Kings, it's all about giving the player more agency and less scrambling.
All right, let's move to Holy. The changes here seem focused on removing complex tracking and, well, changing one of their most iconic mechanics.
We have to start there. Light of Dawn. It is no longer a frontal cone. It is now a circular radius heal around the Paladin.
Yeah, for people who loved aiming that cone, this is probably a bittersweet moment. But the intent is clearly about combat approachability. No more trying to hit that perfect 40-degree slice in a chaotic raid.
It's a trade-off. You lose a skill-intensive mechanic, but you gain massive usability. And the new circle is getting a huge boost from Breaking Dawn, which increases the radius to 25 yards and boosts the healing. The area that covers is just massive.
And there's better cooldown synergy, too. Ringing of the Heavens makes Aura Mastery also cast a free Divine Toll. One button press is now incredibly consequential.
But we do need to talk about the shift to predictability. Talents like Awakening are moving away from being triggered after a set number of casts to just being a random percentage chance.
Which is a gain for the casual player, right? You don't have to track cast counts anymore. It just happens.
True, but it reintroduces randomness. High-end healers rely on knowing when their next big cooldown is coming. This is a clear choice by the developers to prioritize approachability over that expert-level predictability.
But Holy Paladin's Apex talent, Beacon of the Savior, that seems to be the definition of powerful, intelligent spot healing.
It is extremely potent. It automatically puts a beacon on the lowest health ally near you. Your direct healing on other people then transfers a huge amount, 30 to 50%, to that beacon target.
And it's so smart because when that target is full health, the beacon just jumps to the next lowest person.
And crucially, when it applies or transfers, the target gets an absorbed shield and 10% damage reduction. It perfectly reinforces the Holy Paladin niche of being a lifesaver. It's an automated, powerful tool that requires almost no extra work.
So stepping back to look at the whole class, Retribution gets refined resource spending and devastating funnel damage. Protection gets a clearer defensive identity and some amazing QOL. And Holy gets more approachable while doubling down on being the best spot healer.
I think the overall assessment is that the changes are philosophically sound. The class feels less complex, with power consolidated into abilities that feel really meaningful. The goal of higher agency and less information overload seems to have been met.
We did flag some reservations, though. Rhett's single-charge Templar Strike might feel clunky, and Prot's new mastery has that tiny risk of a low-roll death. But these feel like minor notes.
I agree. The whole redesign kind of boils down to a fundamental choice they made. You see it in Light of Dawn shifting from a cone to a circle, or the move to percentage-based procs. It's a commitment to making the class accessible.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. For a class defined by decades of iconic ability design, like that Light of Dawn cone, how much uniqueness is worth sacrificing at the altar of modern combat approachability and simplicity?
It's the defining trade-off of the Midnight Paladin. They're simpler, but in some ways maybe a little less unique.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Paladin revamp. We hope you feel thoroughly informed and ready to step into your new armor and test how these changes fundamentally alter your preferred playstyle. We'll see you next time.